Yes. All right. So to respect everybody's time, we are going to go ahead and get started now. Thank you for getting us online, Sarah.
You're welcome.
I think we might, we're Trish Turner?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Don't know why, but
all right,
we're in.
Go with it.
We're in.
Okay. I'm going to close this door. Andrew, you want to take roll?
Maria, I am guessing you said you're ready to take roll call? Is that correct?
Can you hear me?
I heard you, but barely. You're walking away. Could you repeat that?
Yes. Would you please take roll call? Can you hear me now?
Okay, I can hear you now. I was informed Jennifer Smith will be about 15 minutes late, so I'm going to let you know. All right, starting with our roll call. William Weiss?
Present.
Jan Coppinger?
Present.
Catherine Vanderwall?
Present.
Rebecca Harper?
Here.
Jennifer Smith? Not present. Nara Dalbaca?
Present.
Robert Geary?
Here.
I think I saw Robert Geary in the Zoom room. Okay.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And then our fire district representative.
Is here, but Paul Blues will be speaking on behalf of the fire chiefs.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So just to recap or refresh on the latest grade is on Brown Act. It's important to have a quorum in person in the room. If you're planning to attend online, then we should have posted where you are attending on our agenda. And so because we did not do that, Robert and the fire chiefs will not be able to vote today. However, you're welcome to participate. So in the future, if folks know that they're going to attend remotely and can't make it in person, please let us know before we post that agenda, and then we'll make sure we get it done right so you can have your vote through the Zoom room. Yeah, Nara.
There's also a Senator Laird bill that did make it up in capital appropriations last week that will allow for remote attendance starting next calendar.
Yeah, good to know. All right, something to look forward to. So thank you, Andrew, for roll call. Let's move on to consideration of minutes from the July 10th, 2023. I see something is in the chat, but we're not at a point where we have public input yet. So I don't know what, and I can't check it. So.
We can't approve those until Jennifer gets them. Because I wasn't here, so I can't.
Okay, so we're tabling both those meetings or just the July 10th?
Just the July 10th. We can't. All right. I mean, unless Jennifer gets here, we can continue it when she arrives. But I can.
We'll move on to number 4, consideration of minutes of the August 21st task force meeting. Are there any questions in conference room C? Did task force members online have any questions about the August 21st, 2023 meeting?
None from me. Robert.
Okay, so if we have no questions on task force, let's open it up for public input. We don't have any public in conference room C. Is there any public input requested online? Go ahead, Holly.
Well, hi there. Excuse me. I just had a question on the part where it said Rebecca Harper spoke and suggested amending the phrasing of the motion in section 4 for minutes for purposes of clarification, but I don't see what those clarifications are anywhere.
Good point.
Now, I do remember that we did talk about the fact that the motion that was made ended at type 9 and type 10 period, and there was going to be some parentheses or reference to the minutes of March 13th, but I don't see that anywhere.
Ruby, did you have, typically we do have the amendments included in the minutes. So do you have that offhand, Ruby, that kind of wording, or should we table these minutes until next week?
That was something that I had put in one of the drafts, and we had it several different ways. unfortunately. So we had settled with the one that we have currently in front of us. So I can absolutely put different phrasing in there, but we decided to take the phrasing out.
Yeah, we're gonna need to put that back in. Sorry.
Okay.
So we don't do like play-by-play minutes, you know, what everybody had or what everybody did, but we do need to include amendments so that it's clarified, or so that it is clear in the minutes what we changed.
So you're talking as well as prove as needed.
Exactly.
Okay. Under public comments, it looks like Karen McCart's last name is misspelled. If we're amending anyway.
Under which number?
Number 7. MCCAR. And then spelled correctly above.
Wait, MCCAR?
Yes.
That's what I see on my number 7.
Oh,
maybe I got the wrong one. Oh, okay. I'm looking on the wrong minutes.
Yes, at the very bottom, that should have been corrected. And what Nara is saying at the very bottom, it says MAC.
Yeah.
Instead of
that's not standard, so
yes.
That's fine. That's just a typo.
So, if I may ask, is Ruby by chance able to tell us more or less not more or less, exactly what the language will be added to the end of the fix on number 4? Like, are we able to do that so that we can prove these, or?
Right. Yeah. I don't know if Ruby has the old versions of the stuff that accidentally got stricken. So
then we'll
no, yes, we have, there's technically 3 versions of it. That first version that was in the last agenda packet, with all the phrasing that was included, or excuse me, it wasn't actually spoken, but I had included it in there. So we can absolutely, if everybody's comfortable with just putting in that parenthesis, putting those back in there, and then as Holly had stated, just referencing the March 13th minutes, because I believe that's what we all had come to an agreement on. But I just didn't want to put that in if that wasn't.
Let's take the time. Let's just table them, and we'll make sure that it's pretty clear and concise, and come back for approval. Okay, table those. I would like to. Let's see. Okay, so
we did have one other hand raised in the Zoom room.
I'm sorry.
On that.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, all. This is Sarah Bonner, Policy Director for LCCA. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to second that does need to be added for clarification in reference to what was discussed on March 13th. And then just a housekeeping note, Nara, it's super hard to hear you. So if you can just speak a little bit more loudly when you talk so that we can hear you in the Zoom room.
Sure. Thank you. Is that better?
Yeah, just loud and clear.
All right. Let's Ruby, please note that Jennifer Smith was present at 1:14.
Yes.
Excellent.
So we should have the July 10th one.
Yes. Okay. So we're tabling 4, or we're continuing that over to the next meeting, and we'll go back to number 3. Consideration of minutes from July 10th task force meeting. We are waiting for you, Jennifer, because Rebecca wasn't at the meeting.
Okay.
All right. So are there any questions from the task force on the, Sarah, your hand's still up too, by the way, on the July 10th, 2023 meeting? Seeing none here, are there any questions from the task force in the Zoom? Willie or Robert, Paul or Robert?
None on my end.
Okay, seeing none, we'll open it up for public input. Is there any public input for the July 10th, 2023 minutes? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the task force for action.
I'll move to approve.
Oh, we have a motion, and do we have a second?
Second. Nara.
Excellent, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor in the conference room? Yes. Aye. Is there anybody? Oh, right. Well, note that Rebecca is abstaining. Is there anyone against approving the minutes? Seeing none, that is approved with Rebecca abstaining, which Ruby will note there. On to number 5, consideration and recommendations to the Board of Supervisors regarding zoning districts and permit types for type 9 and type 10 delivery licenses for cannabis related businesses. Did we need to talk about 10? I think I might have put that in accidentally. Had we already talked about 10 and we were throwing it back in just for clarification? Or did I just
We were just talking about 9.
We're just talking about 9. Yeah. Okay, well, we don't have to take action on 10 to talk about 9.
Okay.
Okay, who wants to make the presentation for type 9?
Well, it was going to be me, but can you do it on my computer side?
We do have the recommendation that was turned in earlier.
Yeah, sorry. You want to? I got it. You want to do it? You can go for it. Okay. Well, I guess loud, because I'm the LCC. Yeah, I guess you can. Okay, I can talk on me. Exactly, and all the others. Okay. So this conversation we were talking about was for I don't think this is the right chart though. Because type 9, we recommended in the ag zones. Auxiliary 2.
Andrew, can you put up the table? Your screen?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Okay. So type 9 retail delivery only is kind of like in the middle of that table, and it looks as though it has minor use permits, C1, C2, C3 incidental, highway commercial at CH, M1 incidental, M2 incidental, and industrial park MP incidental. Then a minor use permit in unclassified, which we don't have any of that anymore, and PDC, plan development commercial. So you're saying we're missing
the agricultural permits, yeah, which we pulled our membership on, and they would like to see type 9 delivery only available to them in those zones.
Okay, so that's consistent with what was turned in by LCCA, allowed in all cultivation zones where retail is allowed, ancillary to licensed and permitted cannabis activity.
Correct.
So if we take a look back at the chart, then that puts us in, where can we do retail?
Right here.
And we got all the, so we've got APZ, Ag, TPZ, RL, RR, and SR, where we have, wait, no, that's not SR. Yeah, good. Okay.
And I apologize, we just put it in letter form. We did not update your chart.
No, this is good. We can actually amend this on the face and then adopt it.
Yeah. So yeah, per the vote of our members, we're going to allow cultivation where in all cultivation zones, we'd like to offer the type 9 as well, provided they already have a permitted cannabis cultivation.
Okay.
So ancillary licensing.
Or are applying for new.
And then,
well, I mean, once they get the license.
Yeah, so they can throw it in.
Right.
Yeah.
Just can't apply for one and then ag zone as a delivery.
Correct.
I don't see a permit type recommendation. Oh, but it's ancillary, so it'd be whatever the original permit was. Okay. Okay. So let's take a look just so we can, let's see, ag. Okay.
So I have a question, and I realize it's a stupid one, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. Essentially, what we're talking about changing here is, and I realize this was part of a previous presentation, whatever, but the adjustment to my chart will involve putting either major, minor, or this other category of use zoning permits under Ag, APZA, TPZ, RL, RR, and that would essentially make retail delivery only or retail storefront type activity permissible on all of these otherwise licensed cultivation locations.
Correct. Only where there is an approved cultivation permit.
So every cannabis farm would also be able to retail or
that's what this would say.
I just forgive the directness.
Yes, if approved by the planning department, and if they meet the development standards that we're gonna decide on, because obviously the fire department's gonna have something to say about type 10, probably in particular.
Okay.
But you couldn't open up a storefront without a cultivation site.
Right.
And also it would require, you know, to meet with whatever building codes are required of a commercial business storefront.
Yeah, and so it would take any approved cultivation permittee or location out of the exemption from 4290 and 4291. So it could cause a lot of these to have to repair their roads or widen their streets or do their turnouts or all this stuff that previously they would have been exempt.
Simply because in the event, or you're saying in the event that they would want to pursue retail options,
yes,
whether delivery or otherwise, they would be then obligated to meet this different standard of everything
yes,
else.
that would trigger those requirements.
But that would not be a new requirement de facto for any new cultivation applicants. They would still be held only to this lower standard, not the 4291 standard.
Cultivation. Let's say somebody turns in a permit for, okay, so let's say this passes and gets adopted and goes into effect. Then anybody turning in a new application for cultivation that also wanted retail would not be exempt from 4290 and 42.
But if they didn't make any, I don't need to, like, there's not a sort of, there's no judgment involved with this question. It's more like if someone only thought they were cultivating, they apply. A year or two later, they're like, oh, well, we'd also like this. There's a lot more people driving by now. We should have a retail site as well. There would be a requirement that they reapply, update their application. I mean, what would the process look like then? I'm more worried about moving from category A to category B.
Okay, so let's say you've got an established farm out in the boonies,
sure,
but all of a sudden now people start driving by, or for whatever reason you think I would really like that would be a modification to your use permit that would require a discretionary process.
Okay.
We can't just say, okay, we'll just make a note on your file because it does have impacts.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure I asked. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Those are good questions.
I want to also clarify whether with a type 9, because members of the public would not be coming in, whether that might, when we look at development standards, whether that might change, whether they would have to do the 4290 road standards. I might not be talking about it. Because it's a vehicle trip from the farm out and not from a member of the public to the farm.
So before we advocate for development standards, we're going to set that aside and do those when we do development standards. Additionally, the only reason why the cultivators are exempt from the 4290 is because the board passed a resolution. So that automatically kicks that kind of a question up to a policy decision. So cool. All right. So if I understand correctly, what is before the task force is type 9 retail delivery only, as you can see in table 27, with the addition of the districts APZ, A, TPZ, RL, and RR. And it would either be a major or a minor use permit, depending on what type of cultivation permit has been attained or is under consideration. Is that whatever?
Maria, I do want to provide some clarification, similar to the scenario that Will brought up for many of our already approved existing cultivation sites. If they want to come in and add a type 9 license for delivery service, what process would they go through? Would it be a minor use permit in addition to the existing minor or major use permit?
According to this recommendation, if you had a type 1 or 2, which only required a minor, then this would require that level.
Another minor.
Yes. If you had type 3, then the modification process you would do would be a major, since the type 3 required the major. I see. I think we got it.
That's a legal requirement too, right? If you have a major use permit, if you modify it, it's a major use permit.
Correct.
Yes. It's a minor, and that's just how the land use laws work.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And to add one other factor that came up here in conversation was 4290 compliance. If they were adding any retail or retail storefront, that would most likely include the addition of a commercial structure, which would trigger 4290, 4291 compliance. So.
Correct. Yes. Okay. Any task force questions? Andrew, can you put that down? Stop sharing screen so I can see everybody in the room, please. Awesome, thank you. Do we have any task force question or task force member questions on this recommendation for type 9? Seeing none, we'll open it up to the public. Go ahead, Bart. Please state your name for the record too, Bart.
Thank you. This is Bart Levinson. Reading through the source materials for the meeting today, I thought I saw regulations about if sales are allowed, then restrooms and facilities need to be provided for the customers. And I was wondering at what point would that be discussed? And does everybody know that when you add sales, that's what you're adding is an obligation to have restroom facilities?
Thanks, Bart. That is going to be in our development standards conversation. So
why isn't it now? Because why they would have to plan? That's a giant thing to have to plan for.
Oh, sure. And there's going to be a number of giant things people are going to have to plan for. But the way you operate, including like your setbacks or your requirements for your power or, you know, all those things, all those nitty gritties on what it really looks like on the ground, those are all development standards. So hang on to that one, because when we do start talking about development standards, that will come into play.
And when would we see that?
We're going to do development standards after this, the recommendations for the zoning districts and permit types go to the board, because we need to get their input on what we should be, you know, what they think is likely to go forward or be considered in the future. And that's when we do development standards that are specific to those types. That way we're not going to be doing standards on stuff that the board doesn't want to see anyway.
And do people in the industry who are present already know that there are going to be things like that required of them when these permits are expanded in this way?
Absolutely.
Isn't that part of
okay.
It's mistaken at 4290 and 4291?
Not necessarily restrooms, but that comes into like public health safety code and stuff like that. So it'll definitely get regulated. Okay, thanks, Bart. Patty, you had your hand up. Did you take it down? Can't hear you.
You're muted.
Yep, sorry, I was muted. I guess I just, you know, I've just struggled through this process for the last 5 years, and it just feels like every step of the way, it's been just really hard to go after what we initially had planned, which was a micro business with just a very modest hope for having the ability to continue with the Prop 215 model to get medicine to a very specific group of patients that we were already aligned with, and to make medicine for those people. And it just makes it's very hard to sometimes sit in on these conversations, and I just always try my best to bring us back to the reality is that we're dealing with a commodity, but we are also dealing with a medicine. And we're situated in a place that is economically extraordinarily challenged. People don't have the ability to go to these dispensaries. They don't have the ability to go drive out. I, as a farmer, have the ability to get medicine into patients' hands. And I think when you're operating at a certain size, you have to have the ability to do that. Because for me as a small operator, even getting stuff to the store is extraordinarily costly. I paid $750 to have my cannabis delivered to 3 locations here in Lake County last month. That was for a $3,000 tab. That's very hefty. I can't afford it. I'm doing meaningful work. I want to keep doing that work. But I'm pigeonholed by some of these policies. And I just want to throw that out there for everybody to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Is there any further public input from the Zoom room? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the task force for action.
I'd like to just briefly mention the reason that this is also really important for the farms that are going to be able to do this. Type 9 is an easier permit to get, and what this gives is the opportunity for farmers to get money into their pockets immediately. As most farmers are experiencing, there's delays in getting paid from distributors and retailers. And for farmers that are family farmers, subsistence farmers with their cannabis, they're putting out a lot of cash by putting the product out there and then having to wait sometimes months or a year, or they don't get paid at all. And while this isn't probably going to be the bulk of how they sell, it does offer the opportunity for them to get money from a local customer that goes immediately into their bank account or whatever it is that we're
Bank account you're talking about.
Yeah,
cash flow.
Yeah, and yeah, it's cash flow. So that's part of the reason why this has been something that I've been really wanting to make sure that we do for our small farmers.
Okay, good. So if I could, before we go to action, if I could just get clarification. When someone has a cultivation license, in order to then do delivery only retail, they still have to have the distributor license. They still have to take it out for testing and all that stuff, right? You're not going to just walk out into the garden and clip off some stuff.
It's still a 3-tier system.
Okay.
So it'll still have to go through all the steps.
Cool. Yes. I just wanted that out there.
And you still have to obey the laws in terms of amounts that you can legally sell to any person. So you're not going to be selling pounds and multiple ounces to any member of the public.
So it's still a good amount of regulation, but it would enable the smaller growers like Patty and a bunch of other ones to do that. Okay. Yeah.
Can I ask one more hypothetical?
Let's get this all clarified before we take action.
So we talked about like agritourism type stuff in the cannabis world. And so I guess I'm wondering, there was a desire at one point in previous discussions to have the ability to, essentially establish a direct to consumer line of sales through that type of thing. And I'm wondering what that would look like for a type 9 cultivator who also, or excuse me, a type 1 or 2 cultivator who also gets the, delivery only type privilege.
So if they had like a bud and breakfast, is that sort of what you're thinking, or like an agritourism,
just like a farm tour,
so that what would happen there, and I believe that this has happened in other locations as well, is that the delivery would be potentially on site to those locations, to the location of where the person is staying, or to an area of the farm that would be designated for members of the public to be on. Your licensed premises, you wouldn't be allowed to do that. And it's probably
otherwise it'd be storefront.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of what I was asking.
Right. Yeah, like if somebody went on a walnut tour at a place where they have, like a shop, you can go in and, oh, I really like those walnuts and buy them. You wouldn't be able to do that.
Right. You would have to, if you were going to do that, you would have to have it delivered. You have to put in a delivery order and have it delivered to you, possibly on site. If there was an area that was on site that was allowed where members of the public could be. So Oakland, I think, has done this, and I think there's a hotel in South Lake Tahoe that also allows this. So it's like if you're checked into the hotel, one of the things that comes with your hotel room is a menu for the Type 9 license that is on site, and then you put in the order through that delivery, and it can be delivered to your room at that point if you are a guest at the hotel. And sometimes it's a restriction, or if you're a guest at the hotel, you're the only ones that are allowed to do that. If you are a guest at that, if you're a signed up guest for an elevated yoga or a farm tour, that it would be restricted to that, not just members of the public that would wander up. So that's probably a development standard question.
All right. I knew I was going to wander.
Yeah.
I'll shut up. Thanks.
And I think, back to what Maria was asking, the key to any of these on-site retails is that it does still have a paper trail and movement through from the farm to the distributor who gets it quality test assurance, the COA, and then back to the farm to sell through their retail.
or to the retail. It's not back to the farm, but back to the retail that happens to be on the farm. But what we have done here was by allowing for these same folks to get a type 11 instead of it used to just be the type 13 distributor or self-transport. By allowing an easier path for that type 11, the farm could then become it, and for all intents and purposes, a micro business where they would also be the distributor, but that product still has to. They would then be the one that would take the product for testing, and their COA, which is their certificate of
that thingy that the lab gives you.
Yes,
that's the okay.
Yeah, that's an
analysis.
There we go. Thank you. What's the A?
There's lots of options there.
So that'll have the potency, sometimes terpene testing if you pay for it, as well as clearing you for heavy metals or pesticides and mold.
Cool.
Sorry for shouting.
All right. So since we had some more discussion, we'll open it up for public input again. Go ahead, Bart.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. That not now.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. There was an article, and I'm sorry, I forget whether it was the Lake County News or the Record B, about a dispensary at the county fair this past weekend having direct sales, and the article referred to that they were using a model for a delivery system already used somewhere. And I wondered, did we all know that already exists in Lake County? To what extent does it? To what extent is it now being expanded? I didn't know that that was already permitted within the county. So I'd just like clarification.
I don't.
Okay, thanks, Bart. So it's important to note then that the fairgrounds is state lands, and so they're not subject to city or county regulations. So that would have been up to their board. But that's news to me. I missed the fair this year, so that's interesting.
That's the article. I can look into it. From what I understood, Highway was not launching their delivery until this week. It's the county fair does not yet allow for sales within the county fairgrounds because the city of Lakeport has a retail ban. So if
with the storefront retail ban.
A storefront retail ban.
They do allow delivery only in some limited areas, but they have some significant setbacks.
And so a delivery licensee can deliver anywhere in the state. There's no restrictions. They can pass across county lines. So it may have been that delivery company was taking advantage of a large group of people that were going to be somewhere and letting them know that there is delivery available within a very short location.
All right, but since considering how the state fair is out of our jurisdiction, let's bring it back to the agenda item. Thanks, Bart. You can put your hands down. Aaron?
Hey there. Not sure how great my connection is, so if you can't hear me, I'll put it in chat. This is Erin McCarrick from Clear Lake. I think it cut out when you guys already said that type 10 retail licenses are allowed to deliver. It's inherent in their license. So even if, the zoning recommendation stayed the same where it's type 10 delivery, the delivery option is still there. The type 9 is just a lot easier for folks to access, a little bit more open, egalitarian, I guess. So Clear Lake has it where anybody who is cannabis zoned can get a delivery license just because it helps people go direct to consumer or helps you get your product out there, lots of things. So one, clarifying the type 10 license, and then also voicing my support for including type 9 in the same zoning recommendations.
Thank you, Erin. I don't see any other hands up in the Zoom room, so we're going to bring this back to task force for discussion and or action.
So I make a motion to pass the LCCA recommendations regarding the type 9 delivery license and allow it in all cultivation zones where cannabis cultivation already exists.
As an ancillary use.
As an ancillary use.
As well as, that stuff was already existing. No, wait.
Yeah, that's for the other cultivation licensing. Separate topic.
Wait, but what about these guys? Oh, that.
None of that changed. Just
don't allow.
Discussion.
Unless it's in CR.
Okay. Am I confusing everybody now? Maybe. Make sure I'm clear. So this is not, so the C1 and on is not part of the recommendation, right?
It was already adopted.
But it wasn't recommended in CR. So they're going to stay not recommended in CR?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so it stays not.
Because retail was recommended for CR.
There's no cultivation
storefront.
In
but not delivery on it.
Oh, we don't have delivery on CR. So we might.
We don't have a second yet. If you'd like to amend your, wait, don't second yet. They're still figuring out what their motion is.
I don't think you have to change the motion, right? Because it's in all cultivation zones where retail is allowed. CR is cultivation. There's no cultivation.
So it doesn't matter.
So that's why
it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Okay, so we're good.
Wait, but it's it's all cultivation zones, but SR is not included. That's something that is not on the chart. My type 9 and type 10 do not include an SR, and my types 1, 2, and 3 did. So that is an inconsistency as well. I think we should name them. Why can't we just name them?
Let's name them.
Why don't we just say if I'm out?
Because you're not recommending it in SR, right?
No.
Okay.
I don't mean to speak for you. If you are, that's certainly fine. Or if that's a discussion on but
the motion should be clear.
If not, may I offer a friendly amendment to your motion that all, as you said, be approved in zones APZ, A, TPZ, RL, and RR. In addition to the other zones previously noted on this chart, including C1, C2, C3 with an asterisk. Forgive me. Skipping CR apparently. CH, M1, M2, MP, and then I believe that's or PDC. Excuse me. Thank you, PDC.
Excellent. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone in this room that is opposed? No. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And Ruby, did you get that? We're going to list it out in the minutes when we write those out, just to be clear.
Yes, I did.
Okay. So our next item on the agenda is to consider the summarization of the recommendations, which is that table that we've been looking at. I would like to switch items 6 and 7 as far as our order, because the recommendations for cultivation zones on licenses 1, 2, 3, and 5 will eventually hit this table anyway. And so I'd like us to make that or take any action if we want to on number 7 and then integrate that into number 6. All right, so we're going to take up number 7. Recommendations for cultivation zones on licenses 1, 2, 3, and 5. Who's presenting for that? Great. Jennifer, that's Jennifer for the minutes.
So as state laws have evolved, it's been 5 years since Prop 64 passed, which now allows for cultivators to carry a Type 5 license. A Type 5 license is unlimited canopy based upon what you're locally permitted for. So, for example, if you have 5 1-acre permits at the local level, you can have 1 5-acre permit at the state level. This was January 1st, they started releasing those. The second thing we wanted to talk about was revising the minimum parcel size allowances in the zoning table for cultivation to allow for those smaller parcels, the 5 to 10 acre parcels, to have parity with the larger parcels so that they could use 50% of their parcels for canopy. And that would be an example of the 1 per 20. That particular map is not equated to the 5 to 10 acre parcels. And then we want to consider sunsetting the farmland protection zone overlay.
Okay, so let's take these in order.
Okay.
Because otherwise we'll be zinging all over the place.
Yes.
So let's go to the add type 5 license in zones where commercial cannabis cultivation is currently allowed. Do we have any questions on that in the task force?
So that just reduces the amount of permits you have to have with the state, right?
Correct. Like, for example, I have a 2 acre canopy at this local level, but I have 11 licenses at the state level because I have 11 small licenses that are stacked upon one another. This would allow, and so I could get 1 2 acre license at the state. It's really an administrative issue more than anything.
And it makes a track and trace system a bit of a nightmare because the track and trace system is for each license number that you get at the state. So then you're having to figure out where on the map you've got your specific cultivars growing and make sure that that map matches.
But it doesn't actually change the amount of canopy that you're allowed to.
Correct. It's just administrative cleanup.
It means that you can do it all under one license number.
Administrative cleanup.
Yeah. Doesn't change any of the locations whereupon you could do that, but it's not as if you could
setbacks still exist. You can't plant it wherever you want.
Correct.
You still have to.
And development standards would still be what they are, or whatever.
Right now, if here's my 2 acres, but there's 4 licenses here and 4 licenses here. If I say I'm going to plant a plant in this 1/4 of a license over here, it has to go in that location, so that if I have a high rate of death of clones, I can't move those plants anywhere else. I can only stay there. Whereas a new 1 license allows the whole premise to move plants from before they're planted, obviously, from one location to another.
Otherwise, you might have to distro them over to your other license.
Sounds like it.
It's great. It's just an administrative nightmare is all it is.
But again, I just want to make sure I ask, it doesn't involve the consolidation of any of your farming operation, yours or anyone else's, whatever. It wouldn't involve like saying, instead of growing on these acres here and these acres here, I want to just do it all in this county or all in this particular farm site. That would all still be restricted in the same ways that it already is. This is simply a matter of how you keep records and come back and forth between.
Yeah, there's no allowance for site plan changes or any of that. That would require going back through licensing.
So do you still have to have 2 separate permits if you have 2 separate sites?
I would still need 2 separate permits locally because local permitting is 1 acre increments. But I would have 1 license at the state level.
Even if you have farms in different locations?
Oh no, it's premise specific.
Okay.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
So when you say type 5 license, do you mean that people could apply then for a type 5 permit to operate a type 5 license?
No, because a type 5 permit does not exist in Lake County. Lake County is 1 acre increments. So for example, because I have my property is licensed for 2 acres.
Okay, but the request isn't to add type 5 as an option?
It's because right now the way that not at the local level.
So what
large? Well, I know that, but neither was 1, 2, 3, and 4 either until we added it at the local level.
Right. So yeah, I want to add type 5 to all cultivation.
All right. So someone could come in and apply for a type 5 for anything from like 2 acres on.
Why do they have to apply for it at the county level?
They don't. You would take your county permit to the state. You would just upload it and say, county lets me have 7 acres of canopy. I would like a 1 type 5 license for 7 acres.
Right. But then on the county level, it would be the 3 use permits for type 3s.
No, it'd actually be one use permit for multiple type 3s.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's just changing the words. It's not really changing anything.
Yeah.
It's just making it easier for the cultivators to obtain one license instead of several licenses for the same project.
In certain zones, the county also requires you to not do a second. If you have, go over by a little bit on an acre, you have 1.1 acres, you have to apply for 3 different licenses with the county because sometimes you have to apply for a cottage instead of small. You have a medium, the county.
Right. So, for anything, well, okay. So let's take a look at the table. Let's see how this is going to be reflected in the table. I'm thinking we're adding a line for type 5.
Right.
In all the cultivation areas.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Which I would really appreciate. I mean, administratively, it would be a lot easier for us to do a type 5 than 3 type 3s. You know, it just clears it up. It would still be the exact same project description. We'd still have the same density regulations. Everything would still be the same, but we would just be doing one major use permit for a type 5.
One major use permit for 7 acres.
Yeah, which would be a type 5. The 7 acres would actually just be the project description.
Yep.
Okay. I like this.
It's inspection.
Okay. Are there any questions in the Zoom room from task force members? Andrew, would you please take down the table? Thank you very much for having it available. Awesome. Seeing none, we will open it up to public input specific to the addition of type 5 or adding type 5 licenses where cannabis cultivation is currently allowed.
We have one question in the chat from the public. Did you open it up to public comment?
Yes, public comment.
Can you open the chat while you read it?
I have it opened. Let's see.
You open the chat for us. Can we open the chat?
Let me check the view.
All right.
Hey, I'm playing around the computer. Who knows what could happen? Oh, that's not so bad. Okay.
Who's the guest?
Guest, is that you, Angela? Guest, would you?
Let me see if I get this thing to work. Yes, it is. So I was asking, there was no description in the agenda of what type 5 is. So if you can just, if someone there can give us a description for type 5. I know we know the descriptions for type 1, 2, 3. So if somebody there can throw out a description.
Sure. I think type 5, if I understand correctly, is cultivation over 1 acre.
Okay. Thank you.
Outdoor, and then over what, 22,000 square feet indoor?
Correct.
Okay. So the same, it just says, it takes like license type number 3 plus 1. So anything larger than the 3.
All right. Thank you. It just wasn't in the agenda, and I just know, for the people that can't find it easy.
I'm going to scroll up to the top of the chat just to make sure we aren't missing anything. Nope. Looks like we're good. Okay.
And so I can be more specific with you from the licensing. It says a large outdoor is more than 1 acre of total canopy. Large indoor is more than 22,000 square feet of total canopy. And large mixed light site with more than 22,000 square feet of total canopy.
Super duper.
So right now, if somebody wanted to grow 8 acres of cannabis, they'd have to have 8 different
type 3s
at
our level.
At the county.
It would be 1 major use permit for 8 different type 3s.
Okay. And sometimes it might be more than that because it might not be type 3. There's certain zones where you have to do smaller parcels, and so you have multiple, even more.
Yeah, let's not even get in the weeds on that, because that's something that should be changed to development standards.
Okay.
You should just be able to issue canopy.
Yeah.
And not worry about how the state does it.
Are there any further questions from the public? Questions or comments from the public before we bring the type 5 back? All right, seeing none, we'll bring type 5 back to the task force. Adding type 5 licenses in zone where commercial cannabis cultivation is currently allowed. Let's just take these individually as far as voting goes, too, just to be clear.
Okay.
So, if there's no further discussion, we're ready for action.
I move that we add type 5 license in the zones where commercial cannabis cultivation is currently allowed. Second.
Nara. We have a first and a motion and a second, so that was Jennifer and Nara. All those in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone in the conference room that is opposed to that? All right, Ruby, that passes unanimously. Going on, revise the minimum parcel size allowances in the zoning table for cultivation zones as follows. Allow for cultivation of canopy up to 5% of parcel size for parcels between 5 and 10 acres.
Okay, so what is it currently?
2.5%.
So that would allow for a cottage on a 5-acre parcel and just under a type 1 on a 5-acre parcel, and then just under a type 2 on a 10-acre parcel.
So you could have a quarter of an acre of canopy on 5 acres and half an acre of canopy on 2 acres. If with this.
If that were to be recommended.
Yeah. It's at parity with parcels that are over 20 acres.
So one of the things I can tell you why they started at the larger acreage when the board first made the policy was because let's say in ag land specifically, there's a 40-acre minimum because as the parcels get smaller and smaller, they become what we call ranchettes. And so they're used actually for a primary residential use rather than a commercial agricultural use. And so you see that even in the 10-acre parcels, because of the price point of it being able to make it as a commercial ag, even at the 10-acre is still rough as for like vineyards and things like that. So in order to preserve the residential character of the smaller parcels, that's why they went to the larger parcels. But that was a long time ago. So wherever the task force wants to go now, I'll leave that to y'all. Are there any questions on this one? Comments, questions from the task force? If not, we'll open it up to public input. Seeing none in the Zoom room, we'll open it up to public input. Go ahead, Bart.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. This is the thing that multiple town halls have been discussing over and over again. For example, I have 2 properties in Lake County. Both are in existing exclusion zones. And one of those areas would be theoretically changed by this change if you make it now. And I happen to know that in that area, many people bought because it was an exclusion zone. And so I would urge this group to take very seriously the consideration of the effects on residential areas and not just do something in the moment right now because you can. This is something that's been discussed over and over again in the town halls, and I'm sorry they're not here today to tell you how they are affected by this, but they most certainly are.
Thanks, Bart. Yeah, Holly, we'll get to you in just a second.
Jennifer or Nara, approximately how many plants do you think somebody could grow in a half an acre?
In a half an acre, they could, depending on their cultivation style, it could be anywhere from 1,250, about 1,250 plants.
And how would this change the exclusion zones?
I don't believe there's actually any exclusion zones, right?
Bart may have been referring to the size of the parcel. We do have exclusion. We have buffers around municipal water systems, community growth boundaries, things like that. So, but we don't, and so because we had a number of these different buffers on the map, it's looked like exclusion zones, but we don't have like an overlay exclusion zone.
So would I be correct in just assuming all this changes is if they can now currently grow 2.5% on the same land, they can now go 5%, and that's the only change.
It would still need to meet whatever zoning and setbacks are currently required on that particular rezoned parcel.
But it wouldn't open any new parcels. Okay, yes.
Are we sure this is not a development standard? Let me pull that up. Hey, Andrew.
I do feel like we're getting into development standard.
Well, yeah, because
topics.
I'm wondering if this actual topic is a development standard, because that table is in table 27.
Yeah, I could share it if you want to see it, but I think I don't really see the agenda properly kind of addressing it as is or bringing it to the table.
Would you pull that?
But I have been, today's my first day back from vacation, so I'm catching up on stuff. So if something happened while I was gone,
yeah, no, it actually just occurred to me that the table, the density is probably a development standard.
I think you're 100% right.
Okay, so then we don't really want to do
got a little overzealous in our polling number.
Okay. So Holly, if you want to go ahead and have a comment, just know that we are not taking action on the second bullet point today.
Oh, excuse me, thank you. That's fine. I just wanted a clarification. So you are not asking to reduce from a minimum parcel size of 20 acres down to 5 to 10 acres?
There are already 5 to 10 acre parcels that are allowed to cultivate.
Okay, and is that a certain type?
Yes.
Okay, because type 3 wouldn't be, correct?
Correct.
No.
Okay, got it.
For 1 acre, type 3, you need 20 acres. So for larger grows, you're limited to 5% of the land.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okie dokie. So we're not taking action on bullet point number 2. And then I also had the same question on sunsetting the farmland protection zone overlay. So Andrew was going to take a look and see where that was housed, because I don't think it's an actual zoning district. I think it is, which means typically if it's an actual overlay, it has its own article, like Article 5 is ag, Article 6 APZ, those sort of things. And so you're creating a zoning district overlay. That did not take place. So this is actually also under development standards, which we're not talking about today.
Correct. Sorry.
Okie doke. So we are not taking up number 3, which then puts us on, Bart, your hand's still up, but we're moving on.
I have a question. Could we please see maps about where residential areas are, so that there's a better understanding by everybody about what this actually affects, what's being discussed in the task force?
You can find that zoning district map at any time on our GIS sites on the county website.
I'd like it presented in the task force meetings for all to refer to, so that when you're talking about changing acreages to lower, that people can have a very real understanding of how it would affect an entire residential area.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind when we do go on to development standards. Thanks, Bart.
And Bart, currently, whether it's a type 3 for a larger grow or a type 1 or 2, the exclusion zone is the exclusion zone. It excludes it. So I don't think introducing this is bringing anything into that exclusion zone.
Okay, so then I think that finishes up number 7. We will go on to number 6. Let's see here. All right, so I'm scribbling on my table. I'm adding a table 5 or a type 5 under type 4. And then it would always be a major use permit because it's over an acre. And so I'm drawing solid dots under APZ, A, TPZ, RL, RR, and SR, because those all allow for at least the type 3. Is that consistent with what everybody thought we were doing? Yeah. Okay. with that added, and with the type 9 retail delivery, which we already approved in a few of those zoning districts, this is then the table of recommendations from the task force for permit types and zoning districts.
What did you do with your dots, Maria?
I made solid dots on type 5.
Solid dots to basically mirror what type 3 is doing.
Exactly. Okay. If you can get a type 3, then you can probably get a type 5.
Gotcha.
But depending on your, your overall land size.
And then on type 9?
On type 9, I have a hollow dot and a solid dot.
Okay.
Just to identify that it's going to mirror.
And an asterisk.
And an asterisk. That's a crowded little box. Yes. So just to mirror that the permit type level is to reflect or be the same as whatever they had to get for the use permit for cannabis. So if it's a minor use permit, then your delivery only is minor use permit. If it's a major use permit for the larger grows, then that's a major use permit modification if necessary, or throw it into a major use permit application. Okay.
On the type 11,
yep,
we made that recommendation. We have it as a zoning permit. Is that how it's currently allowed in the code, or do we need to change that to a modification?
So let's take a look at that. So for type 11, you mean the add-on, not the standalone.
Correct.
Right? So as an add-on, you had it just as a, okay, so let's talk about that. The add-on is for those permittees or the applicants that already have approved use permits for cultivation or some other type of license.
Are they then modifying that use permit?
They are modifying that use permit. I don't think of what kind of impacts we might have. Well, the task force previously, it looks like, recommended zoning permits.
Correct.
Where all the cultivation can take place. And then major use permits, C3, M1, M2, and PDC. So your question is, do we want to keep it the way it is, or do we want to change it so that it reflects, so that it's that same ancillary? It reflects whatever permit.
It's more a question about how that's it's a paperwork question, I think, because we were discussing doing the type 10 as a potential add-on, and then realized that we would have to do a modification to the use permit. And so I'm asking whether—
I think you got a point. Otherwise, the way it looks like in our ordinance is it goes up to 27.3, and there's all these criteria for it to get a zoning permit, which is a ministerial permit, as opposed to a modification to an existing use permit, either minor or major, which the same path requires those. I think you've got a really good point there.
Okay, and then do we have to do that in the type 13s too?
A cannabis distributor, transportation only, is somebody driving around and taking people's product elsewhere, right?
Type 13 is self-distribution.
This is cannabis distributor transport only license. It's different from the type 13, which is self-distribution. So this is somebody coming onto your farm to pick up your product and take it elsewhere.
Yeah, correct.
But not to, not to.
In which case, that is not an add-on. Like, you're not gonna, if you're cultivating on your farm, you're gonna get the self-transport. You're not gonna get the transport only.
Correct.
So and there's very little impact with somebody driving onto your property, throwing your product in the truck and taking it to the lab or for storage. So since it's not an add-on, I don't think it has the same ancillary.
I mean, it could potentially be an add-on if an existing cultivator decided they wanted to get type 11 distribution license. So they could move around their cannabis, but they could also go pick up their, their colleagues or their peers' cannabis at their farms. They could do that with the type 11. Currently, we've had some of our cultivators want to do that, and we said, no, you can't do that with your license types. But if they have obtained it, then they could. So,
well, it would automatically then fall into our same code practices. If they had an existing use permit and they wanted to add on a transport only to that existing use permit, it would go the same route as the original use permit. We wouldn't do a zoning permit.
Yeah, because there would be, transportation impacts, a lot more trips.
Right. I don't know that we need to specify that it's ancillary if it's add-on, because we already have that elsewhere in our code. I think we're covered with that. And then zoning permits is just for
type 13 self-distribution.
I'm talking faster than I'm thinking. Really interesting. Okay, so somebody comes in, new applicant, not connected to anything, they're just doing transport only. So they don't even have a premises, right? Because they're not the actual distributor that has, sort of the warehouse that stores things that securely while it's getting tested, or acts as a broker. They're not doing that. They've got a vehicle or a fleet of vehicles.
Yeah. Erin has a distribution license.
Transport only?
No, she's full distro, but she may not know about.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I'm envisioning this as if you're a transport only business, you're like I realize trucking isn't quite the same scale, but you're like a trucking company.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You're maybe you have a location where you store your equipment, but otherwise your purposes are fulfilled in the vehicle on the road doing.
Then it kind of depends on the project.
Necessarily, if you pull a batch, you take it to testing, you may have to hold it in quarantine.
But you can't if you're transport only. Right?
If you're type 13, you may still have to have an administrative area.
Yeah, the type 11 license that we have in the county does have premise and administrative holding.
Yeah,
right, but not
area that's locked and secured.
But 13.
We're on type 13.
Yeah, but 13 is just driving it to the 11.
Type 13 also requires an administrative holding area that can be locked.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
You have to have a quarantine while it's at testing.
Okay, which reasonably would then kick in security and some things that need to be evaluated. So I don't know if a zoning permit is appropriate for that. But it's not me. You guys are making the decision. So I don't mean to
what's illegal, and then it's a legal question, right? So we want people to be able to have these permits stand up legally. So
from a land use perspective, if it's an existing structure and there's no additional construction, then I don't see a zoning permit being an issue. But if you are building a new structure to service that administrative holding or area,
so
it does trigger development.
Holding area and most of the time sits on the farm side of things.
Mm-hmm.
So the cultivator would hold their product in administrative hold, while the distributor license, the self-distro or transportation only, would have whatever is being sampled to take to the lab. Actually, to take to,
and that has to be in a cage, generally.
Yeah.
So.
And the administrative holding area is simply storage, lock secured storage, which could qualify as an ag exempt structure.
Right, but it's actually on the
not triggering a building permit.
Administrative hold though can stay on the farm side. You don't need the administrative hold on the transportation side.
Let's also talk about what happens if you have a fleet of trucks. You've now got environmental impacts for like truck parking that you don't usually see.
Can I just ask what the scale of the vehicles used for this typically are, whether we're asking the folks who are here from the public who do this, or otherwise, I mean, like, talking about vans? We're talking about trucks? What were we talking about?
Talking about small vans, yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I sincerely do not know this, but is there an environmental impact implication for a FedEx to go in versus to all of those they use trucks too? I guess I'm just wondering if a van service would require the same as a trucking company.
There are certain zoning districts where different sized vehicles are allowed as accessory uses. Let me just pull up Article 27 real quick. Or Andrew, if you have Article 27 up, it's in, oh no, it's actually, sorry, it's in definitions under accessory use / agriculture.
Give me 1 second, I'll look it up.
Okay. I think that just a regular full-size van is not a problem. You know, we do have certain limitations, like for residential accessory use, you can only have like a 3/4 ton truck.
Sorry, what exact definition? I've got Article 68 here.
It's accessory use / either agriculture or commercial. What we're looking for is vans.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Might be under cargo van. Yeah.
I got every.
Good. I appreciate that you guys are thinking your way through this deliberately.
Thanks.
Oh, I didn't see the other side.
So the only vans that are coming up in Article 68 is under mobile recycling unit.
Well, that's not what I'm
well, I mean, it's not exactly the same thing, but similar. A mobile recycling unit means an automobile, truck, trailer, or van licensed by Department of Motor Vehicle, which is used for the collection of recyclable materials.
But that,
yeah.
I'm going to dumb questions until someone goes and stuff. So, an administrative holding area doesn't have to be a building. Sounds like it could be a locked fence. Am I wrong?
Correct.
But I don't know. You seem to have different thoughts.
I defer to Jim on this as the farmer.
It actually eliminated administrative areas altogether on the location side.
As in the state has changed the rules.
Like you just don't have to, like it's just
you tell
an area on in the building. It's nothing segregated or anything. It's just you say that's administrative hold
right. And then if you get a message, put something in administrative hold, you throw it in a duffel bag and put it in that area or whatever.
But that is a different area from where you would otherwise store your finished product that is ready to be shipped out. I see.
It could be in that same space, like that corner.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I've seen some people do masking tape on the floor.
The point is to be able to segregate out. This is what's being tested, and this is what will ship if the testing comes back.
That's different.
Okay, Maria.
Administrative hold is sometimes also a message you get from Metric that you have to hold.
I don't know.
Is the message from the track and trace software?
Okay.
Maria, I think I found what you were looking for under accessory use.
Into administrative.
Okay.
Too. I think there's a.
Hold on a second. Oh, I was waiting for Nara to finish her sentence. Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay, sorry about that, Nara. Accessory use is a use conducted upon the same lot or parcel as the principal use or structure to which it is accessory. The use is customary, incidental, appropriate, and subordinate to the use of the principal building or the principal use of the land. And uses accessory to uses permitted within first obtaining a use permit shall be activated with or subsequent to the construction of the principal structure or activation of the principal use. Uses accessory to uses permitted by use permit shall be activated with or subsequent to the construction of the principal structure or activation of the principal use only if authorized by the permit. Otherwise, the addition of such accessory uses shall require either an amendment to the permit authorizing the principal use or a separate use permit. And then there's furthermore under accessory uses and structures commercial. Sorry.
Commercial. That was awful. Okay, but what we do have,
I could share the screen because it does get into fleets of vehicles and accessory use and structures for commercial.
Well, actually, commercial. So I was going through the accessory uses and structures commercial, and it does not list fleet vehicles. It lists storage of fuel for fleet vehicles.
Oh, so yeah, you're right.
The use of fleet vehicles and keeping them, the parking is actually industrial, which is a problem in like ag, APZ, TPZ, RL, and RR.
Yeah, it would make sense why I believe our one type 11 is in a C3 zone or
okay. So, however, are we able then to regulate the size of the fleet or require that it be parked inside? Would that be a development standard?
Development standard.
Yeah, we could say that in these zoning areas, they're allowed up to, some sort of like not a lot. But if they want to operate more of a fleet of vehicles rather than just have a couple vans, then they have to go to the more industrial zones. That's a development standard.
Correct, yeah.
And it would be consistent with zoning permit because it would be ministerial. It would just be one of those things that we set up saying, you have this many vans. And you have in a building.
I think the plural factor in the industrial section kind of provides that development standard. If there's more than one, it would trigger that.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you just live in one of the zones where this is proposed to be allowable, then what would happen if you want to buy a van and take cannabis from point A to point B?
The way this recommendation is listed, then if you are in APZ, Ag, TPZ, RL, RR, SR, and you wake up one morning and you want to buy a van and be a transport only guy, you would only need a zoning permit. So you would come to us, you take a look at the criteria that would be listed in our table that would say, you can have a van, you can have a van, and, blah, 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 all the other rules. But it would regulate the density. And so long as you are amenable to those guidelines, it's a zoning permit. Should you want to exceed those guidelines, then we have to take a look at what you want, because it might bump it up to a minor, a major. It may not be allowed in that zoning district. So it brings it pretty much to standard inquiry.
So could part of development standards also be that if you have a delivery only license, your whatever area,
delivery only or transport
only, that if you have to hold that, it can't be at your place, it has to be at the farm? Is that a development standard? Because I feel like people don't really care about if you have one van or if you have two vans. They care about, is my neighbor storing however many pounds of cannabis next door all of a sudden, or are they not doing that?
That's a pretty good way of framing this. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty solid way of framing it. So, and I mean, again, I'll just speak knowing what other industries are expected to do or not do. I mean, you bring a farm transport to a field and fill it with pears, for example, as is going on in dozens of places around the county right now. Uh-huh. Those typically stay there overnight and then they ship the following morning, or they maybe ship that day. It sort of depends. But if there is to be a hold, it just occurs on site and it's like considered parking for the vehicle. And it's sort of
right. Yeah, the trucker doesn't take their truck of pears home for the night and yeah.
I mean,
and state law says you can't do that.
Right.
But Jen, then with that same analogy, that trucker takes his truck back to his truck park, which is zoned properly for it.
In theory, but
yeah,
not as far as I'm understanding it going on typically. But yeah, I mean, in theory, yeah. And certainly if there's a requirement for an administrative hold, I'm imagining an operator not wanting to unload and load multiple times if they can avoid it. Right? If there's going to be an administrative hold and you've got multiple vans, put it in the van, park it somewhere. And your hold, I don't know. I mean, or am I thinking about this the wrong way?
That's not cool.
That's not cool.
I mean, if you've got, it kind of depends on where you park it. Then you're going to need security if you're storing cannabis in your vehicle.
Sure,
that's right. Or at your your place in a building.
But we can regulate that.
Yes.
Through the zoning permit. Okay, so it's up to the task force if you wanted to change what we had already, what y'all had already recommended. But we've tried to sort of illustrate what it would look like at a zoning permit level, which is what was approved previously. Is there further discussion on that one?
So yes or no, if it stays the way that it is, we can work on it in development standards with what you're allowed to do.
Yes. Okay. Okay, Erin's had her hand up for a while. Sorry, Erin, go ahead. Whoop. Erin took her hand down.
Come on, I want to hear from the distro.
No, Erin didn't want to talk anymore.
Yeah, it's not an internet issue. It's an unmuting issue. Yeah, it might be duplicative, but just from this perspective is type 11 is full distribution, and that is the only one that can do testing. So they're the only ones that have the holding area. And it is supposed to be, you can possibly, like, it depends on the flexibility of the state evaluator, but you are supposed to have a separate room. So generally distribution companies have an untested room that can store anything untested. And then the lab comes in there and tests. You have a tested product room, which can be any, such as tested COA bulk flower, packaged products, edibles, liquids, what have you. And then you have a packaging room. You don't have to, but most people do. So it's usually those three rooms in a type 11 distro. A type 13 distro really just gives the farm the flexibility to pick up clones from a nursery, so you don't have to pay the transportation cost. Take their product to a manufacturer so they can get it turned into whatever they want to, take it to another distributor so they can have it stored there. It just saves them cost. I should know this. I don't, because I'm not terribly familiar with the type 13, but I'm not sure how strict they are on vans. You don't necessarily need a, Ford Transit van. I think you have some flexibility on your vehicle. It just needs to have a secure, back. But for the most part, they're not going to have a fleet of vehicles just because they're doing their own transportation. They might be able, again, not sure about the rules. They might be able to use a trailer if they need to move a lot of bulk product that's authorized by the DCC. And most distros don't necessarily even have a fleet of vehicles. We have one van. And we're zoned in an industrial area. So I hope that helps with clarification. I think you guys are just talking about type 13 today, but just to give you a, barometer for the two distros.
Thank you, Erin. I don't see any further to be open up for public. It's all been, I think this has all been task force. Okay. Is there any further task force?
So just looking at the state requirements are for a distributor, transport only licensee who's licensed to engage in self-distribution and who is doing it on the same premises. They have to comply with the same security provisions contained in Chapter 1, Article 5 that are applicable to their licensed cultivation. So that's where the state security lines are.
Okay, so let's see, public input. We have Holly. Go ahead, Holly.
Hi, excuse me. I'm not sure. Are we just talking about right now or discussing the distributor or the entire table at the moment? That's basically my question.
We're talking the entire table.
Okay. All right. So then I have a couple of things here. Wasn't there, and I apologize because my computer's down, so I don't have any of my notes from last week. But wasn't there one, and was it processor, where there was something listed that was removed? Because I'm not seeing the change from the previous table to this table. But I may be totally wrong on that. But I thought it was processor, and was C2 part of that?
I think C1 was not included. I don't remember the C2.
Okay, so it was listed on the last spreadsheet. If I find here, processor was listed as C2 and C3, and I thought something was removed. I was just wondering if someone could check on that. And then my next question is, there's differences between the last table and the table that we have right now. And then also on the back side of the table we have right now, which lists all of the the zones and the zoning, et cetera, there's a lot of discrepancies. And so I was wondering if somebody could just actually go through and make sure everything's correct. For instance, just to throw one out, if you look at type 10 retail storefront, down here it talks about major use permits, but if you look at this table that we have here, there's no major use permits on it.
Good point. Andrew and Ruby, you want to address that?
It's not just that section. There's a couple of things there, and I was just hoping somebody could specifically go through and double check it with what was voted on also.
Yeah, I can take the responsibility of going back through it. But as far as this chart here that's presently in front of you being different from the last one that I presented, I literally just drew the same chart from the last to this one. So there wasn't any modifications done to this chart in front of you. It is the same as the one previous.
Yeah, we're supposed to remove C2 from the process. That was the edit that we requested.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Kat.
But
yeah,
the discrepancy between the text version and the chart is going to need to get clarified, because we want to make sure that all of it reflects the actions taken by the task force. And if there are discrepancies, then one of them can't be right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was also something on the consumption too. I also wanted to just bring up the concept that we had discussed last time about instead of having retail on-site consumption and retail on-farm consumption, the distinction between a type 10 retail storefront or a type 10 retail storefront with consumption lounge designation, because I just think it's a little cleaner in the long run.
Can you say that again, Holly? I wasn't listening.
Okay, so basically what LCCA had presented back in, January or, and again in June or July was there were two types of type 10. One was type 10 retail storefront, and the other one was type 10 retail storefront with consumption lounge designation. And it just seems to me to be a little bit cleaner, because I assume if someone wants to have a type 10 retail storefront, they don't want to have to go through the hoops of what is needed for a consumption lounge. And it's just hard to understand exactly what is the retail on-site consumption or on-farm consumption.
We have them broken out below.
I have my hand up.
Hold on, Sarah. Okay, so it looks
and I
like,
feel like we broke those out for clarity pretty well. And so,
well, what I'm thinking is we'll just have, when we do take it to Ag Advisory Board, we're going to have many explanations on some of these.
Yeah.
Just like at the very least, types, what type 1 and 2 and 3 are. And so we'll just include that. I think that that'll help with that clarity.
and I think it would help, like if in the chart, if the other retails were listed below the type 10 retail storefront.
Yeah.
That were gathered together. So then you could see this is the extra steps you have to go through.
Okay. Thanks, Holly. That's helpful. We'll improve that clarity. Same data, just improve the clarity in the presentation when we go forward to the Ag Advisory Board and then the Planning Commission.
But also to be clear that this written version, this is essentially a written version that makes this chart.
They're supposed to mirror each other.
Supposed to mirror each other. Right?
Yeah.
So,
that's why I'm glad Rebecca's looking at it right now.
Right. Exactly. No, I was just going to say that needs to happen. Okay.
Yeah, we need to make sure that these are both synthesized, and not only that, but that they reflect the action of the task force.
Cool. That's all.
Taken previously. Okay. So we'll give her a little more time. Go ahead, Sarah. Sorry. Thanks for waiting.
Hi, yeah. So Holly is correct that C2 processor was incorrectly copied over from a table when it was listed in red, and then in the next version it appeared in black, and so that needs to be removed. And we did, and that was verified at the 724 meeting when that red R appeared in the C2 line next to processor, and then in the subsequent tables it didn't show up corrected. And we noted that change at the last meeting, that it needed to be edited. We also talked about removing the extra lines between below the type 10 resale license, because for the purposes of discussion, we broke those out to indicate on-site consumption while we were deliberating. But there's only one license there. There's one license type, and it's type 10. And with a type 10 license, you can get on-site consumption. It's not a lounge designation technically from the state of California. It's on-site consumption where you can consume on-site. So that should be the correct language as we break it down and specify, and just have one line on that table for type 10.
I'm not following that. What I was thinking we were going to do is do the type 10 retail, but then under that list the retail on-site and the retail on-farm consumption.
So they're not different license types, and they're not different permits. It's just something you can activate under them. So we broke them down to different lines on the spreadsheet so that we could talk about it, but it's not a different license type. So it's kind of inconsistent. It would be like breaking it down and saying, well, what are you going to do with your license here versus there? It should just be one line on the permit, on the zoning table. And then in your application, you would indicate if on-site consumption is going to be there, and the development standards would say if you could have that.
All right. So are you saying then that the retail on-site consumption and retail on-farm consumption should be combined into one line that just says on-site?
No, I'm saying there should be one line that says storefront retail type 10, because that is the license you get from the state of California. And on-site consumption is just a feature that you can activate should the county allow it. So one line for type 10, all.
Yes, but the consumption parts become development standards.
This is totally a policy decision that needs to be brought to the board first, only because they have not made any sort of decision or taken any action on-site consumption yet. And so that is a policy thing. We can't just say, oh yeah, if we present it to them just with only type 10 retail, it's going to look like we're trying to move.
I think that we just need to be very clear. And like, I think I would sit with this and say that while it is not its own license type, here's where it fits into the chart, and this is how it should be explained.
Looking at the chart, type 10 retail storefront, the way Sarah described it, is pretty much reflective in the other two columns that we're discussing. We could just remove those other two columns. I mean, so they don't have on-site consumption for retail on-farm consumption under C1. Well, we don't have farms in C1 anyway, so it's not applicable. So if you just disregard the retail on-site consumption, retail on-farm consumption, basically what Sarah just explained is pretty self-evident in the type retail. Well, maybe not self-evident, but
I think administerially that makes sense. But the issue is that the board has not discussed allowing or not allowing retail on-site consumption or retail on-farm consumption. So like Marae is saying that if we just go ahead and delete those two lines from retail, they're not going to automatically consider that retail storefront and retail on-farm is included in that. And if they decide they don't want to allow those, then you're kind of in a sticky situation because that was included in your recommendation for all type 10.
Or that conversation could come up when we bring development standards to the board.
But that's confusing and not direct.
Yeah, because I'd rather know from the board from the get-go if they're not going to entertain consumption at all.
Yeah.
I don't want to go through and build the development standards.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to combine the two consumption lines, but then put it underneath type 10 retail as its own call out line.
Yes.
And we can just tell them this would be integrated into the existing use permits or whatever, but if you guys allow it.
Right.
Should there be asterisk on type 10 retail storefront under right here, under type 9 and type 10 under the
ag zones?
Ag zones.
I guess like there should be, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
All of
that they're incidental,
yeah, right, for these types.
Yes.
Right.
And so the columns slash numeric articles on the chart that don't align are number 10, type 9, number 11, type 10, number 13, type 11, Number 16, cannabis processor's license. Number 17 and number 18. Those are the ones that aren't the same.
Oh, God.
Just so you know. Okay. Thanks.
Oh, yeah. No, okay, so we're also at 2:40. We're not going to get this fixed today. I'm going to have to take it back. And we'll. Yes, I want that list.
Okay, let me just take a picture.
And okay, so I strongly recommend we table this until the next meeting.
I would move to do so. Thank you, Rebecca, and everyone else who's been trying to get this straight out.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? All right.
So we got type 5 handled. There you go. So I just marked what exactly was wrong, but now we don't have to go through all the sections.
Thank you.
It's just these ones.
I appreciate it. We'd love to go through the minutes too.
Yeah.
Are we on?
We're on number 8. Discussion regarding establishing a cannabis ordinance task force subcommittee to review and approve material related to the cannabis ordinance.
Yes, this was about.
Yeah, Jen and I kind of both requested that we have representatives of the task force confer on the material that's going to be presented to the board of supervisors, planning commission, whoever, and that there be representatives
present, like when
as a part of the presentation.
And is it only for the board, or did you want to do that for planning commission and ag advisory?
I think all three.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Okay.
So I personally didn't want it to be a separate subcommittee necessarily.
More like just appointing people.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you just, because if it's only 2 of us, a cannabis person and a not cannabis person, then you could just email us both and we can confer without having an entire subcommittee, and that would still be right.
Okay. So then the questions are, how many of y'all and who? And the task force would just then establish that as the subcommittee, since that's what's on our agenda. It's going to be a subcommittee from here on out.
Well, wait, I realize it's what's on the agenda. My question, I guess, is, does it have to be because it's on the agenda as such, or can we be seeking a solution to the problem of needing some sort of task force representation and or testimony at some of these other meetings where our discussions will be relevant?
I don't think normally that wouldn't need action. You know, we'd just be working together.
Right. That's kind of what
But are you suggesting that on an ad hoc basis? No.
I'm suggesting absolutely against that.
So then we don't appoint anybody. It's just whoever wants to work together on my presentation.
Well, or you're saying not that. You're saying.
I was saying that, okay, there should be 2 seats. A cannabis representative and a not cannabis representative, whatever that seat is. And I said I was more than willing to be the not cannabis person. Somebody else could be the cannabis person, or if I can't do it, I could ask somebody that's also not a cannabis person to fill my spot. But that we just have it set up so where every single time there's a designee from each portion of the group that works with Maria on the presentation, provides input, and then absolutely attends those meetings as part of the presentation.
That way we're not limited to the 3-minute public comment and we can actually engage.
Sure, you split up there with staff. Yeah.
Because our input, I mean, it doesn't really make a difference at that point because it's all chopped and diced and
then that way it's during a honeymoon, she can send somebody else. Jen is elsewhere, then
you can
I can go. Yeah.
Sure.
And
we're just establishing that there's 2 seats and that those seats will work with you on every presentation.
All right, so 2 seats, one of which is either LCCA or cannabis industry representative. And then the other one is not that.
Yeah.
From one from anybody else.
Right.
All right. And this also, that being said, I wanted to point out with Paul that I'm assuming the fire chiefs are also going to stay engaged because the board really, they want to hear from you. So even if you're not appointed to that subgroup. Okay. I'm going to assume that was a yeah. Sorry, Paul. I was talking right over you.
No, it's all good. Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. Awesome. All right. So,
I mean, I think certainly if I am the person that is the non-cannabis, I would be more than happy to circulate Paul. And if he has things he wants to be known, that would be on the non-candidate fee.
Right. It just can't be a majority of the task force because you don't want to take action outside of our task force meetings.
Absolutely.
All right. So discussion regarding establishing a cannabis ordinance task force subcommittee of 2 to review and approve materials related to the cannabis ordinance prior to presentation. At the 3 deciding bodies or 3 bodies. That's great. So you guys can take action. And with each upcoming presentation cycle, we can decide who those 2 are.
Yeah.
So
I mean, like I said, I'm willing to be like the de facto person, and then other people have just an earning desire.
Does anyone on the task force in the Zoom room have questions? Not, we'll open it up to public input. Go ahead, Bart.
Hi, are you waiting for me to speak?
We are.
Oh, thank you so much. I just want to make sure I understand in terms of transparency, what negotiations will be in front of the public? What changes are you making today that will remove from the public eye or the ability for the public to see what you are negotiating?
Okay, we're not going to be negotiating anything other than accuracy of presentation and does it make any sense? So as far as I can tell, because if it's only 2 members from the task force, no action can be taken on behalf of the task force. This would just be me starting my presentation, drafting my staff report, and then I pass it to the other 2 people to make sure that they can understand it. But there will be no substantive changes outside of these task force meetings.
And then does whatever conclusion is come to then get presented in the task force so that the public can hear what it is?
No, it will be presented to the Ag Advisory Board, the Planning Commission in a noticed public hearing, and the Board of Supervisors in a noticed public hearing.
That's what I'm questioning, whether that's right or not, that this is sets up a wall that excludes the public, and it seems wrong.
You will absolutely have no less than 72 hours to access the staff report and any information. And if you find something that you feel is inaccurate or not what the task force decided, then I will absolutely count on you to let the Ag Advisory Board, Planning Commission, and Board of Supervisors know. Thank you. Is there any other public input for today? If not, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the task force for action.
Well, it's a discussion on the agenda, not a consideration.
Yeah. Though if you need a motion to establish the 2 seats, yada yada, I'd be more than happy to make that motion.
Yeah, actually, with the with discussion, we can also, it's the same as consideration, pretty much. We use consideration as a more common word in our agenda to denote action being taken, but a discussion does not preclude action, like a presentation or an update would.
Okay. So I'm consistent with what we've been discussing for the last 10 minutes. I believe that we create a 2-seat panel that would help to review with you material that will be presented to subsequent boards and committees of the county that will review the materials we've been discussing in this week.
And then attend the meetings.
And attend the meetings to provide testimony as needed.
And I'll second that.
So thank you. We have Will and Jan seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone in the room opposed? Okie dokie. So then, thank you. That takes care of number 8. Public comments not connected to any item on today's agenda, but still under the purview of the task force. Do we have any? We're losing people in the Zoom room. Okay. Seeing no hands raised, we're going to go ahead and adjourn today. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there.
Thank you.